Good afternoon, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to the latest edition of Blether of Thegither. Yeah? Yeah? No, okay, good. So, this is the Nationals Weekly Show where we look back at the news and views over the week. Joining me today in the studio is Nat Williams and Angela Haggerty, both from Common Space. So thank you both for coming in today.
We were having technical issues there with an iPad before it started. And then I could see you doing something.
That's why you were just poking me. It's done. You're live. It's like, don't do this to me right now. So apparently it's all fine. So thank you for tuning in. As always, we do want to hear your comments and views as we're going throughout the show. So please do pat them down into the comments below, and we'll keep a wee eye on them as we're going forward. So this week, just to kind of open up with, because I like talking. This week, the National had its first ever roadshow. So we were up in Inverness yesterday. Don't know if anyone's watching any of the stuff that we had coming out of it. We had a really fun day. We had a stall in the Eastgate Shopping Centre, and we met a bunch of our readers, which was really nice. And we also have today ran 6 pages worth of content of stories that our readers brought us from local kind of things there. So we did some coverage of local businesses. We did coverage on the most northerly, I think, extreme frisbee team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't know there was one.
There is, and it's very north. And do you want to guess what its name is?
No.
Come on.
I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
I'm really bad at puns.
Maybe the viewers should get to guess. And then you'll
Just get to guess and tell them at the end.
show.
No, because anyone can open the paper and cheat. Okay, so basically, the name of the most northerly, like the top of Scotland extreme frisbee team is Highland Fling, and yeah, come on, that's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, that is the word we'd use. So we did a bunch of coverage of that, and then in the evening we met with Wee Ginger Dog, Paul
it's
Kavanagh.
right there.
Yeah.
On the road with for Highland Fling.
Oh, exactly, right there. It's on
in
the
front of me.
Ultimate Frisbee, not Extreme Frisbee. Close enough. So we met with them, we had a really nice time, and we've got obviously special coverage today as well as a bunch of other things. And it was actually really nice because I'm actually going out and meeting a lot of the readers of the paper. Got to get an impression that a lot of people actually really like the paper. Like, some people seemed really keen to meet us. There's only 1 or 2 people who came around and shouted about how everybody hates Nicola Sturgeon. It's like, is that accurate, pal? One of the most popular politicians? I don't think you're quite right there. But anyway, alright, so we are going to be doing more of these over time.
Are we going to be invited to?
You could come along if you'd like. It'd be nice to have you there, as always.
I think we should do a Blether Thegither roadshow.
Blether Thegither on the road.
That would be good.
I'd be up for that. I'll see if I can get some funding or whatever else to do that with. That'd be great. But so that's that. Keep an eye out on our website. We'll have up-to-date stuff of where we're going to be going, and if this would just work, where we're going to be going and what we're going to be doing coming up shortly. And thank you again to anyone who came along yesterday. It was really nice to meet you. We had a great time. So this week in the news, does anyone have anything they want to start with? What's been kind of big for you?
I think probably the big thing for me this week is getting Nicola Sturgeon in Ireland, because she seemed to get a lot of support. She went over there, she gave a speech. It all seemed quite historic for the circumstances and the context and everything, and she was very, very warmly received. But interestingly, a lot of the politicians over there were very supportive of Scottish independence, and we had a reporter over there, Michael Gray, and his assessment of that was that he spent some time there in 2014, and it was noticeably quite a different mood. So for him, this was, being in the atmosphere over there and actually seeing it all happen, it was really significant. I thought it was really quite a big, substantial change in tone and in mood and everything else. So it seemed to be a roaring success, and it's nice to see the links between 2 countries so close together, so close to each other, with, I suppose to some extent, many similar interests kind of strengthened. So I thought that was quite a nice story. I thought it was a nice story. It was a nice news story.
One of the kind of big criticisms that came out from the independence campaign was the idea that Scotland voted yes, it was going to isolate itself from the rest of the world. So to have someone else nearby, so very friendly, seemingly, about the idea. And do you think that's going to help influence people's minds?
The dynamics definitely changed, because you have a situation where you have a belligerent UK government that's going to sort of shift opinions in Europe. But also, the First Minister, she can make the argument that Scotland isn't going to be alone. It's also got a voice at the negotiation table as well. That's something that Michael, he got the sense of that when he was over there, that there's going to be people who are in the Irish government, who are part of the Irish political class, who will make the case for Scotland. I went to listen to Mike Russell speak yesterday, and he was saying how he never knows whether he can deal honestly with the UK government or whether the UK government will actually effectively communicate what Scotland wants during the negotiations. Having that connection through the Irish government is going to be absolutely huge. But I think there's also the symbolism of the First Minister of Scotland acting like a head of government and having interactions with foreign powers as well. That makes that it lends her credibility, lends the movement of independence a huge amount of credibility as well.
Yeah, and speaking of independence, yesterday as well on St Andrew's Day, when many of us were when the National was specifically focusing on looking at stories of how people had moved away from no to yes, what we also got was the Times publishing a poll showing that support for independence in Scotland was apparently at the lowest that it's been since the independence vote itself. Now, I'm actually not too worried about this because, first of all, that's technically within the margin of error, and secondly, it's an outlier. Like, if you think about some of the polling that came out after, okay, maybe it was after Brexit when it was a little bit reactionary, but there was certainly a spike in interest in people at least thinking about the idea of voting yes. To have one poll that seems to show us moving the other way, I'm not too worried about it. What will worry me is if we start to see a trend in polling data coming out that seems to show that there's a decline in interest, and if the results are essentially replicated over time.
I don't know if I agree, Stephen.
No?
We're 2 years down the line from an independence referendum. If I was a yes supporter, and I am a yes supporter, but I'm trying to think of those people in that aftermath of the yes vote who were really strong campaigners, people on the ground who then seen this surge towards the SNP, this unprecedented surge towards the SNP, and this quite incredible mood actually post-referendum, never mind pre-referendum. And then you had the situation at the general election where the SNP decimated Labour in Scotland, and they've gone on to only just lose their minority in Holyrood. Now, and you've had Brexit. You've had which 2 years ago was unthinkable, remember. Nobody thought that Brexit was going to happen 2 years ago. And it certainly does change the game when it comes to independence, given that membership of the European Union was one of the things that the No campaign said you would lose if you voted for independence. So if I was one of those people 2 years ago and you painted that picture out to me then, I would expect the polls to be moving significantly higher, or I would want them to be, but to be kind of remaining in the same region with a possibility that they might even be going in the other direction. Or was there something in that poll that indicated that the no vote at least was increased? Were you saying that before? So maybe instead of don't know is the
yeah, I mean, the Times poll certainly showed that from the 10-point advantage that no had in August, it's gone up to 12 points. So that's definitely a concern, because you're not only seeing a stalling of the cause of yes, but you're seeing a sort of a hardening of the no, of the no vote, and a slight increase there. I mean, my general opinion is really you're looking at maybe a miscalculation by the Scottish government in putting the case of Brexit in Europe so close to the issue of yes and independence. And of course the argument could be, well, if you look at the makeup of the UK, the way the politics is going, of course you've either got independence in the EU or you've got Brexit within the UK. But I think it mistakes that there are quite a few people who vote SNP who may have been part of that SNP landslide and given the SNP a majority in Holyrood who just aren't ready yet. They may be moved for utterly intangible reasons. It's not going to be one reason such as Europe or something else which is going to shift them. It's going to be a whole process. And like you were saying before, it's as a question of the independence movement having to actually work and go out and convince people rather than expecting the issue of Brexit to magically arrive at a majority.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like similar to you in the sense that I'm sceptical of Poland. I mean, after 2016, who isn't sceptical of Poland? But even on the ground, even out there, even monitoring social media and seeing some of the other, going to more local meetings and things like that, you do get a sense of restlessness from people that they're just not quite sure what the plan is right now. Where exactly do they go from here? Now, I know Europe is a big deal for Nicola Sturgeon right now, and she's involved with trying to develop the Scottish case in that context, and that I imagine is an awful lot of work. However, I agree with that in the sense that I think if you pull the things too close, that's risky as well, because I think people underestimate how powerful risk is when people are factoring in decision making. How much of a Brexit, yes, it takes away Scottish membership of the European Union, but it's also a massive political upheaval, and that scares people. You've also had Trump win just last month, not even a whole month ago, that frightens people as well, because you're talking about
changes on a global scale, global political change that people aren't really sure that they understand yet.
that actually can make people quite risk averse. They don't want to further complicate that until they get a handle on what's going on. If you get the situation in Europe where a lot of far right governments come to power and the whole system of the European Union comes into doubt, then where does that leave the Scottish case if it's so closely pegged to EU membership? So that brings in another element of risk. So a lot of people are saying, yes, you have to do the European thing, but that very fundamental case for Scottish independence, with which Scotland can be a sustainable country and can build links with other countries, etc., etc., you need to be working really, really strongly on that. And I think that's where people kind of fear that 2 years have gone by, and where are the big changes in the case for independence in that 2 years?
But
so, you know, I hate to be pessimistic or negative, but I think it's, you know, important to give as honest an analysis as
We're seeing in the course of our work and some of the things that are brought up to us, and
you know, I think you can, as a yes supporter, you can try and just believe that these things will work out, but that might not be the case. It may require a lot more work and
a lot more pressure in certain areas for that to come to fruition.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is. I mean, there was always going to be work for the Yes movement, like whatever happened, and it's definitely still there just now. And I think you're right that uncertainty probably is making people kind of buckle down a little bit, and also the fact that it seems like I feel like a lot of people want to kind of just maybe not be talking necessarily about independence for right now, other than people who are already sold on it. Like, that's fair. Like the people who want to talk about that. But I think maybe like people are maybe a little bit more undecided. There's just so much restlessness just now that it's kind of like, let's just take a wee bit of time to work out where we're at and then go from there. And that could be part of why this poll is showing this like drop in support. I mean, who knows?
A lot has happened in 6 months. A lot politically has happened outside of Scotland in 6 months, and that it takes time for that to sink in and for people to really get a handle on what they think about all that stuff. So in a lot of ways, I think polling domestically at times like this is probably not going to be as powerful maybe an indicator as it could be otherwise, because I mean, I don't know about you lot, but my head's been all over the place with everything that's been going on, particularly since Trump got elected, trying to make sense of what all of that means.
Yeah. So. But last night in Inverness, when I went to see the Wee Ginger Dog speak as part of the National Roadshow, there was
it the actual Wee Ginger Dog?
It was the Wee Ginger Dog. Oh wait, hang on a second. Here's a photo of and the Wee Ginger Dog with Paul and Callum, our editor as well.
And the giant ginger dog.
And it's just the expression in the dog's face. I really appreciate that look of, oh God, what is this? Got a lot of love for that. But no, last night like there was a real sense of real positivity in the room. Like I mean, it had that feeling I think of kind of during the referendum days where the room was actually stowed out. Everyone was here to hear him talk. Everyone was here to hear that. There was music on at the start. There was a real sense of positivity in the room, and I hate to attribute that to it just being the indie bubble. To a degree, it probably was a little bit, because everyone there was probably already very pro-supporting of it, in support of independence. But at the same time, it was nice to feel that the energy was kind of still there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we can't lose that moving forward.
Yeah, I think the energy is, like I said, going to meetings you feel that restlessness in people. It's because the energy is still there and people want to be doing something, be channeling that.
And we can't be putting too much stock into polling as well. So to kind of come to some of our readers, well, technically readers and also viewers, hello to all the places you're coming from, including Aberdeen, S-Bank, Oban, Ayr. That's quite nice. Are we coming to East Lothian with the Roadshow? Maybe, if you ask us. We're still working a lot of places out. Let's see. So Margaret Black is pointing out that even if we are losing a couple of numbers at the moment, for example, during the last referendum we did start at 27% and managed to go all the way up to 45%.
Yeah.
So if we did begin a new campaign starting at 44% and only needed 7% more to win, could that in fact...
There's a strong argument for that. A second campaigning period would significantly move things.
Yep, so I argue that could push things in, or it could solidify people into the positions they've already taken. We don't know. We'll have to see. Common Green's pointing out that we're in a very strange period where a lot's happening, but not a lot seems to be getting done. And we keep on being asked about indie, but very few are actually out there really looking at the issues or campaigning on them. David Murdoch is not a fan of the show. Stephen Burns.
Sorry, David.
Same as pointing out that the first red line on Brexit from the UK government is that Scotland will not be granted any sort of arrangement, essentially pointing out that we definitely do have a mandate to at least continue asking the question or talking about when we should next be having a referendum. But let's keep an eye on the polls and see how they move over time. Like I say, it doesn't really necessarily indicate too much there at all.
I'm done with the polls.
Never mind
After
the polls.
Brexit, Trump, I'm finished with the polls.
Actually, though, let's talk about the polls for one more second. Just one last point. An interesting one, I'll just point it out and then we can move on very quickly, is that the YouGov poll also had a lot of data on Holyrood voting intentions. And one of the interesting things that is, even if independence isn't, let's say, necessarily moving, what it still was indicating was actually that support for pro-independence MSPs is on the increase. So according to sort of Holyrood voting intentions, even though it's a couple of years away, the Greens are set to take another 5 seats, the SNP is set to take another 1 seat, unfortunately the Tories have to take 1, but the big thing is Labour losing 7, so even though a lot of those numbers are going to like pro-independence things, it's because Labour is essentially collapsing around itself, and we might have already hit a point where the Conservatives are going to take as many seats off of Labour as they possibly could, and so now they're starting to funnel to other directions. We'll have to see where that goes. But either way, that could be very interesting.
It's quite weird when you do polling at this stage of a parliamentary
it's way too early.
Polling,
It does feel way too early. But also speaking of political parties who've had a bit of a change going on just now, UKIP have elected Paul Nuttall to lead UKIP, and the kind of big thing that kicked that off was Paul essentially saying that he was going to put England first. Like and UKIP was going to
and replace Labour as well. I think,
which is one of the interesting things is that we took a bit of flack online for covering this like angle of Paul Nuttall taking this position. Said, oh, but the National, you always support the SNP and they only put Scotland first. I said, well, yeah, the difference is that the SNP is a regional party and UKIP, well, it's kind of in the name. It's the first 2 letters, UK-wide party. But possibly equating that concept of Britishness really just meaning Englishness. I mean, I don't know. Now, what do you think of Paul Nuttall?
Yeah, I remember when we first heard the news in the Common Space office, and I thought it was an absolute disaster. I mean, obviously, people taking the mick out of him. You know, you've got the famous Stuart Lee sketch where he's making fun of his accent and making fun of his politics and how incoherent he is. But really, this is an incredibly worrying time for UK politics in general. I mean, he has no impact on the situation in Scotland, but he is the perfect candidate for UKIP to make inroads into the north of England, especially in areas where there's been sort of a vacuum created, where Labour have taken for granted huge sections of northern cities and towns. And Paul Nuttall, obviously he comes from the north. He does understand the language, the certain tone, and local issues quite well. And even though he himself is quite an odious character, he has the capacity to sort of nudge a Labour Party which is too busy infighting to provide a progressive and alternative.
Yeah, I mean, UKIP continues to really make no real gains in Scotland, so and I understand what you mean about maybe taking it on in other parts of the UK just now, whereas in Scotland that message isn't really going to fly so much when there are actually options other than Labour.
The interesting thing for me was I was at the Festival of Ideas that Jerry Hassan and the Electoral Reform Society organised at the weekend, and they had Don Harris, journalist, speaking there, and he gave some great insights into what's going on in the north of England, particularly around Brexit and the idea of nationalism, which was fascinating and so valuable. And his view was actually that as much as everybody's worried about the far right, the extreme right in Britain, that he doesn't feel like that is as strong a thread as a lot of people fear that it is. His view of it was, when you go and speak to these communities, these are the most left behind, forgotten places. They have this has been for decades. And
Brexit was their opportunity, their chance to make one vote count when they feel like none of the votes have counted for a long, long time. And that was really what it was about. And yes, immigration came into it, but not necessarily for the reasons, for the motivations that people think. And his view was that that England does need to sort of identify what it is now, that there's a need for some kind of nationalist movement whereby people kind of understand what their purpose is in this new setting and where they fit into it. And he feels like Scotland has made great progress in that front and has been doing for quite a long time now. It's not just been a recent thing; things have led to that. But England's really lost, and it actually it painted a really quite sad picture.
very working class, desperate people in the north of England who really just don't quite know which direction they're supposed to go in. Now the worrying thing is that you have someone like Paul Nuttall comes in, and you have Aaron Banks, the multi-millionaire backer of UKIP, I think it was. I think he might have ditched UKIP now, and he's moved on to, apparently in the new year, he's going to fund a people's movement, which sounds like a very grassroots movement in the north of England. Now, you combine these things with the fact that there is no significant presence of the Labour Party still, even now, appearing in these areas. And it's sad almost, because these people have no other place to go. There is no other option for them to go to. So I think there's a lot of, particularly in Scotland and other places where they feel like we're sort of culturally separated because we didn't vote for Brexit, yeah, I keep calling it breakfast, and because we're not racist up here. But I don't know, I feel like there's something really, just really, really deeply sad about the direction that that's moving in. And in Scotland you have the SNP as an option. In England there is nothing else really on the table. I mean, remember when Nicola Sturgeon was doing the election shows, like presidential style things that they do nowadays, and for the general election, and she was so popular in a lot of those communities. You remember people saying that they would vote for the SNP if they could. Mm-hmm. The thing is here that they want the change, they want the alternative, and nothing else is appearing for them. And that actually is a really, really sad thing. And I think that it would be helpful if people stopped kind of punching down at a lot of those communities and realised that actually they're as desperate for help as anybody else is. And unlike Scotland, they don't have their movement, they don't have their civic nationalist movement. What they have is a threat of an ethnic nationalist movement. So Scotland can maybe play a role there in trying to set some sort of an example and say, right, here's how you can do it, and actually build those links with communities there. So I don't know. It was a very insightful weekend, but I think we really need to change our thinking on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think the same as interesting if you actually look at UKIP's slogan for the Holyrood elections, which was "Shake Up Holyrood." The idea you shake it up. It was really bizarre because it's like they missed the fact that it kind of had been and was being, with all of the other kind of constitutional discussion going on. But I can see why that attitude in other locations where there wasn't that option to do so would be appealing to people. And I think we do need to kind of take that on board. So, moving on, one of the other things this week is the digital economy bill kind of popping up to the foreground and a lot of people discussing it. So the digital economy bill is kind of setting out interestingly, its focus at the moment seems to be on pornography, and particularly conventional and non-conventional sex acts, with the idea that it will ban, effectively, non-consensual sex acts from being accessible.
Non-conventional.
Non-conventional.
Not non-consensual.
Non-consensual would make sense, but non-conventional sex acts. So some of the things that basically lists as non-conventional would include, for example, spanking, or, interestingly, the female orgasm, which
I think it says a lot about the people that wrote this, if they think that that's unconventional.
Because, clearly never seen one. And but that's the thing though, it is really strange because it is this thing about pornography and sex acts, but really what it does seem to be is just like, okay, well, male orgasms are fine, but female ones aren't. And it's just, I think what it will ultimately come down to a lot of the time, as it always seems to do with these things, is what you'll find is over time that what actually starts to disappear are things that tend to either relate towards female or queer porn, and you'll just start to see that slowly siphoning off. And there's a long history of that as well, actually, looking at even Canada with the Butler Act. That was a thing brought in to kind of stop, I think it was meant to be like aggressive porn, and ultimately what it was used for was just to raid queer bookshops and make all these books and different bits of content disappear. That's ultimately where it went. And I think when you also double that in with the other move that the Tories have at the moment with the IP bill, where they're going to be keeping records of your full browsing history and who you're talking to and all these other rather insidious things, and even this discussion about banning like sexting, there seems to be this weird move with the Conservative government at the moment to move towards policing the internet in a way that fits into a very heteronormative, very conservative approach to what is accessible and keeping track of what you're doing so that they can essentially monitor that.
Well, yeah, it's a world in which the state has a monopoly on the use of technology, has a monopoly on the use of information that it can get from the citizen. And certainly thinking about the IP bill, it's one of these things where people are willing to give away those degree of rights because they don't think it's going to affect them. They never think that they're going to get held up on something. They never think that a future government might be able to use this information to really shut down our liberties in the future. And it's, I suppose you could say, on the other side of the equation, we need to make that case better to, I think, a vast majority of people, because I think a lot of people are opposed to it. But I think if you go out to a lot of areas of England, Scotland, there'd be a few people would be like, oh, nothing to hide, nothing to fear, nothing to hide. And so we need to continue to make that case against really foolish laws that have no grounding in reality or common sense.
I think sometimes it needs to, I hate to say it, but with laws like that, it takes a few casualties first for people to realise the danger of it and how it actually might impact them. I think there's maybe a bit of a lack of knowledge out there as to what a lot of these powers actually mean and how they could be practically applied. But I mean, on the porn stuff, I mean, it's just so counterproductive to me because, if you listen to anyone that knows what they're talking about with these things, they'll tell you that the danger in porn right now seems to be about this really kind of this huge power imbalance relationship between men and women, in which in a lot of porn men seem to consistently treat women worse and worse and worse. There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of idea of the use of force, like all of this kind of fantasy role play is all wrapped up in a lot of what the modern porn that young people are looking at is. And they tell us, women's group tell us this, rape crisis and a lot of other kind of research places will tell you that is a real risk to the way that young men view women, and that they think this is having an actual impact. It's actually translating into relationships, and that's really dangerous. And it seems to me that the way that you would counter that is actually to empower women when it comes to things like porn. I mean, some people like to ban it altogether, but I don't think that is ever going to happen. So, but I think that making it clear that women enjoy sex and women have the right to enjoy sex and women have the right to choose to engage in the kind of sexual acts that they want to engage in, and they can enjoy them, they can have an orgasm, they can do all of these. It shouldn't be controversial to say that. It really shouldn't be. But instead, what they're doing is they're moving that further and further out, and you're leaving all the power with the men still. I mean, you can talk about banning depictions of things. I think actually, with so many things when it comes to misogyny or any kind of sexism, the answer is always to empower the women, rather than to take anything away from someone else.
And this digital economy bill is going to specifically extract from that.
Eh?
The digital economy bill feels like it's going to specifically detract from that. It's going to basically do the opposite of what it's at least being said that it's going to do, and not just women, but as well like people who are queer and possibly discovering that for the first time and looking into. And unfortunately, that is a lot of people's first experience of exploring that side of themselves is through pornography, because it definitely isn't so widely out there that they can do it in other ways. So yeah, it's definitely going to have, I think, a negative impact on itself. It's going to reinforce a very those power imbalances that we already see in play at the moment.
Yeah, so I don't think it's I don't think it will work out in any of the ways that it's intended to, basically, which seems just like a massive waste of time, if nothing else.
But interestingly, focusing on this from a civil liberties perspective, so my first, foray into politics was actually through civil liberties as well, specifically under Tony Blair, or rather the Labour government at that time, when they were starting to talk about introducing mandatory ID cards, and when they were specifically forcing them onto immigrants in the beginning, as well as, interestingly, very similar bills to this that they never really managed to get through, and the Conservatives have managed to. Yeah, exactly, and detention as well, without any evidence. So it's interesting that this side of civil liberties is kind of being kicked back down again, right at the moment that Blair sort of wanders back into politics again. So what we saw the other day was the SNP bringing forward a bill into the UK Parliament, essentially saying that they wanted to have Tony Blair investigated for misleading the Commons on Iraq. And what we actually saw was the kind of old guard of Westminster come together to block that.
So over 400 MPs voted against the motion. Yeah, I mean, that included a large section of MPs that had voted for the Iraq War in the first place. So of course,
How did Labour vote with all of this?
It was a partial abstaining and a lot of Labour MPs voted the motion down.
Okay.
There was a split on the front bench as well.
Has Jeremy Corbyn apologised, Stuart? Do you remember he said he was going to apologise
for the record?
Yeah, he did it at the Labour Party conference.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that point, John McTiernan walked out of the conference hall. So that was a highlight.
Poor John. So hard for him.
But that vote's a classic example of how nothing was learnt from the invasion of Iraq. I mean, for example, the Defence Select Committee came out with a paper, I think it was 2 months ago, or maybe a month ago, about the Libya debacle, and how Cameron had misled the UN on just exactly what Britain and France wanted to do when they went into Libya. And you see that's a clear example of not learning the mistakes of 2003, so you repeat them in 2011 in Libya. And if you have politicians that can get away without any punishment whatsoever, I mean, the investigation wouldn't have ended up in a criminal conviction, but it would have meant he wouldn't be able to get honours such as knighthoods or peerages. If there's no punishment whatsoever, then of course we're going to end up on these debacles in foreign policy.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly as well, Blair is making something of a comeback. It seems in the new year he's going to be launching some sort of project which sounds like it's intended to save the world. Looks like a think tank. There's not a lot of detail about it yet.
Something about taking things back to centre politics.
Basically, it's about the centre being able to come up with solutions to the global crisis that everyone is facing. So, while people are, I think that there is a risk quite often of bubbles, in thinking that because Blair is so unpopular within a lot of the bubbles that we would move in. And in Scotland, that's universal. It's probably not universal, and I think people are in a very frightened position right now, and they're willing to listen to anyone who has possible solutions to that. So while people think the idea of a Blair comeback is impossible, I don't think it is impossible. I don't think anything's impossible after this year. Yeah. So he's sort of the New Statesman did a kind of lengthy interview with him, which I thought was a little bit light. I think they could have challenged him a bit more, but it was interesting anyway, and it's worth digging out if you're curious. But he kind of ruled out a return to frontline politics because he acknowledged how unpopular he was and how much that could be more difficult than helpful. But he definitely seems to be making some sort of commitment to come back to the political fold. So that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on in the new year as well.
Great, yeah. So just to come to some of our comments at the moment, Sarah Mackey saying there's really no surprise that Westminster establishment basically closed ranks on this one. Stephen Pern's basically pointing out that Blair is essentially radioactive. The only person crying out for Blair is McTiernan, and basically no one else, apparently. Yeah, okay, so that starts to bring us towards the end of this week's show. I'd just like to finish with one final story that I particularly enjoyed this week, which was the Foreign Office making a bit of a blunder when it came to Twitter this week and trying to promote how great Britain is. So obviously there's been this really interesting thing for quite a while now, where there's been almost this like very intense promotion of Britishness and how great it is that they're investing in all these things. It's the same way like the DVLA a little while ago said that the reason there's now Union Jacks on your driving licences is because it wants to promote unity, as well as talking about how infrastructure projects that were funded by the UK government were now going to come with big Union Jacks on them to remind you that, be grateful for what we've done for you. It's like, know your place. And it was a really interesting one the other day. They tweeted out this, talking about the Queensferry Crossing opening and how design is great. The problem being that that's not the Queensferry Crossing. That's a completely different bridge nearby, admittedly, but no, it's the Forth Rail Bridge with the Forth Road Bridge behind it, and of course the other important part of that being that the UK government didn't actually fund any of that. It was the Scottish government who were behind the entire thing, and some of my favourite responses were actually published in the National today, just pointing out that that's the wrong bridge, and then responded with people tweeting their own pictures of other bridges, including the Rialto Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, and Jeff Bridges, which I'm quite a fan of. But yeah, I think there's an interesting thing where there is definitely going to be a continuing of this idea of promoting the concept of Britishness. For as long as Scotland continues talking about independence, that will always be an agenda. I don't know. Do you think people are paying attention to this?
I think they were. I mean, it's one of those things where it did backfire because obviously people had a real good go having fun at it. But I mean, it also reveals that people who are, either in the civil service or just generally in government are aware of how weak British identity is, and the idea of the things which bond the nations of the UK together. And so you get this really kind of over, almost sort of feverish, rabid sense of, isn't it great? Unity and wrong bridges and that. I just think it's a case that they've lost any degree of subtlety whatsoever. And it could backfire, I mean, apart from it being hilarious, but it could backfire like further down the line as well. People just get fed up with that kind of stuff being shoved in their faces.
See, I don't think it matters. I think if 2016 has taught us anything, it is that you can say anything on social media, you can write fake news stories, you can do whatever you like and just put it out there, and it doesn't matter if it's not true, you just insist that it is, and that seems to work.
It's a great bridge.
Yeah.
We're going to make England pay for it.
Incredibly baffling tactic of 2016, which just seems to work.
Just shout louder and win the arguments.
Exactly.
Okay, well that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Blether Thegither. We will be back again next week at 3 PM, so please do tune in then. As always, leave your comments and feedback down below. We do like reading them, even the negative stuff, which I have to say each week. But please do tune in again next week. As always, we enjoy having you here and taking part in the conversation. The National Roadshow will be continuing on, so do keep an eye out for that as well. We've got a bunch of other interesting places we're coming to at some point soon, including Paisley, Pennycook, and we're talking to Skye. That'd be great. It'd be really nice to go up north.
Wow.
So
you
yeah.
should go to Fairhow. They're doing that great documentary.
Yeah, Fairhow. Get the egg as well. That'd be excellent.
Yeah.
I'll just start submitting all these entries myself of like, I would like to go here, please. Just like, that would be lovely, thank you. So, as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you all again next week. Bye.
Bye.